Hi everyone, I'm Amy, 28, and I guess you could say I'm still processing what happened last Christmas. My husband Matt and I have been together for 5 years and married for about 6 months now. You know how you think marriage will solidify things and make you feel more secure? Yeah, well, life doesn't always work out that way. We'd made plans to spend Christmas at his aunt's house. Let's call her Linda. She's a bit of a family matriarch, always hosting big holiday gatherings. Her house, her rules. I was a bit nervous as usual. These gatherings had a way of making me feel like an outsider. We showed up early, as Linda had requested, with a trunk full of presents, 5 gifts per kid, carefully wrapped and labeled. Matt and I love Christmas, and I always make sure to go the extra mile for kids' gifts. Linda's house was decked out to the nines, twinkling lights, a tree overloaded with ornaments, and at least 50 presents already piled underneath. Matt's dad and grandpa were there too. We settled in, sipping coffee and chatting, waiting for the rest of the family to arrive. Time ticked on. Hours passed. No one else showed up until nearly mid-afternoon. And when they did, it was like a parade of people lugging in boxes of presents. The mountain under the tree grew until it looked like a toy store exploded in the living room. At first, I wasn't too bothered. Christmas is about giving, right? But as the present sorting started, a knot began to form in my stomach. Everyone had stacks of gifts, 10, 15, even 20 presents each. Stockings were hung and brimming with treats. Then Linda handed me a single bag. Inside was a mixing bowl. Yeah, you read that right, a mixing bowl. At first, I just stared at the bag, trying to process what I was holding. A mixing bowl. Not even a set. Just one bowl. I glanced at Matt. He was already unwrapping his gifts. A coat, a sweatshirt, and some kind of meat masher with our last name engraved on it. Matt grills a lot, so I guess it made sense, but even he wasn't getting anywhere near the amount of gifts his cousins were. And then there was our daughter, Lily. She's 8. We'd spent hours wrapping 5 presents for each kid in the family, yet our daughter got 3 gifts in return, one of which was obviously for a toddler. I tried to keep a smile plastered on my face, but inside, I was crumbling. Everyone around me was laughing, tearing through gifts, sharing inside jokes, and calling out, "Oh, look what I got!" The 22-year-old cousin, Jason, and his girlfriend, who's only been around for 3 months, mind you, were buried in presents. Meanwhile, I sat there clutching a mixing bowl like some kind of afterthought. Linda's voice cut through the noise. "Amy, why didn't you bring your camera?" Now, a little context here. I'm a photographer. I do family photos, birthdays, weddings, you name it. And apparently, Linda had expected me to play photographer at Christmas. I figured we'd just use our phones, I said with a forced smile. "Oh well, you should still take pictures," she added. "We need a family album." I was already fighting back tears, but that pushed me over the edge. Not only was I barely acknowledged as part of this family, but now I was the help too. "Sure," I said through gritted teeth. I grabbed my phone and started snapping photos of people opening their presents, while my husband and daughter just sat there, waiting for everyone else to finish. It felt surreal, like I wasn't really there. I kept thinking, how did we get here? I'd helped with every single one of their family gatherings since Matt and I started dating. Birthdays? I was there. Thanksgiving? I cooked and cleaned. I even helped Linda set up her pool while her kids sat inside scrolling TikTok. And here I was, on Christmas Day, treated like I barely existed. When Jason's girlfriend unwrapped another gift, I couldn't help but notice how excited Linda was for her. She'd known this girl for 3 months, yet she put in more effort for her than she ever had for me. I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped outside and leaned against the side of the house, trying to breathe. The cold air hit my face, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my cheeks. It wasn't just the gifts. It wasn't even about the mixing bowl. It was about feeling excluded, feeling like I'd never really be a part of this family, no matter how hard I tried. I heard the door creak open, and Matt stepped outside. "You okay?" he asked, but his tone wasn't concerned. It was more annoyed. "I just needed some air," I whispered, wiping my face quickly. He sighed, crossing his arms. "Are you seriously crying because you didn't get more presents?" That hit me like a slap. "Matt, it's not about the gifts," I said, my voice trembling. It's about how I feel, how we've been treated. Lily barely got anything, and we've spent years bending over backward for your family." "You're overreacting," he said, shaking his head. "It's Christmas. It's about the kids, not you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Exactly, Matt. It is about the kids, and our daughter was basically forgotten today." But he wasn't listening. "If you leave now, it's going to cause a problem with my family." At that point, I didn't care. "I'm done, Matt. I'm going home." "Fine," he snapped. "Go ahead, but don't expect me to defend you." And with that, I left, walking away from a Christmas that had already shattered any sense of belonging I thought I had. I got in the car, slammed the door, and just sat there for a minute. You know that feeling when your mind is racing and you're trying to hold it together, but you know you're about to lose it? That was me. I stared at the house. Through the big front window, I could see them all laughing and tearing into more presents like nothing had happened. Why am I even here? That thought hit me hard. I'd spent years trying to be a part of this family, bending over backward to help with their parties, their projects, even their drama. And for what? To be the outsider, the photographer, the one who gets a pity gift. I turned the key and the car roared to life. The sound snapped me out of my thoughts and I pulled out of the driveway. The whole ride home, I kept replaying Matt's words in my head. "Are you seriously crying because you didn't get more presents?" The worst part? I could still hear the tone he used, like I was some spoiled brat throwing a tantrum. But it wasn't about the gifts. It was never about the gifts. It was about being treated like I didn't matter, like I was invisible. I pulled into our driveway, turned off the car, and just sat there in silence. I checked my phone. Nothing from Matt. No calls, no texts. I debated texting him, but what was the point? He'd made it pretty clear how he felt. So, I went inside. Lily was at my mom's house, so I had the place to myself. I kicked off my boots, grabbed a blanket, and curled up on the couch. I wanted to cry, but I was just exhausted, mentally drained. 2 hours passed. Nothing from Matt. I finally caved and texted him, me. "Are you just going to ignore me all night?" About 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Matt, you really put me in a bad spot today. I had to explain to my family why you left." My heart sank. He wasn't worried about me or how I felt. He was worried about his family, me. I felt excluded, Matt. I felt that way for a long time. Today was just the breaking point. His response, "Matt, you made a scene over not getting enough presents. That's selfish." I couldn't believe it. He wasn't hearing me. He wasn't getting it. I sat there staring at my phone, debating whether to call him. But I knew how it would go. He'd double down, I'd get upset, and we'd just go in circles. Instead, I texted back one final message. Me. "I'm not going to any more family events. I'm done being treated like an outsider." It was the truth. I was done. Done with the fake smiles. Done with pretending I didn't notice the favoritism. Done with being the person they only acknowledged when they needed something. About an hour later, Matt called. I answered, bracing myself for the argument. "Why don't you want to come to family events anymore?" he demanded, skipping right over any kind of greeting. "Because I'm tired of feeling like I don't belong," I said calmly. "I've tried, Matt, for years, but today made it crystal clear. I'm not part of your family. I'm just there." He sighed heavily. "Amy, they're my family. I have to go to these things." "Then go," I replied, "but don't expect me to." That's when he lost it. "Are you serious right now? You're just going to cut them off." "You're being ridiculous." I stayed quiet, letting him rant. He kept going, getting louder and more frustrated. Finally, I'd had enough. "I'm hanging up, Matt. We can talk when you're ready to have a real conversation." And I did. I hung up, threw my phone onto the coffee table, and leaned back on the couch. For the first time all day, I felt calm, like a weight had been lifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing like crazy. Missed calls, unread texts. From Matt. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and sighed. I knew I couldn't avoid this conversation forever. We needed to talk, but I wasn't in the mood for another screaming match. Still, I texted him back. Me. Come home. We need to talk. A few hours later, I heard the front door open. Matt walked in, looking like he hadn't slept much either. His hair was a mess, and he had that stiff defensive posture he always got when he knew a fight was coming. "Hey," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. "Hey." I crossed my arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. "We need to figure this out." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Amy, I get that you're upset, but you have to understand. They're my family. I've been dealing with this crap for years. It's not about the gifts. It's just them. That's how they are." I felt my chest tighten. "And you're okay with that? You're okay with them treating me and Lily like we don't matter?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't done. "I'm not asking for a mountain of presents, Matt. I'm asking to feel like I belong, like we're part of this family. But instead, I get a mixing bowl and a passive-aggressive comment about my camera." I paused, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you know how humiliating that was?" Matt sighed again, but this time it wasn't an annoyed sigh. It was more like a defeated one. "They've been excluding me too," he admitted quietly, "for years." That caught me off guard. "What?" He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "Ever since my mom left, I've been the odd one out. They stopped inviting me to things, stopped making an effort. It's like, I don't know, they don't see me the same way anymore." I felt a pang of guilt. I'd been so focused on how I felt that I hadn't even considered what Matt might be dealing with. "But they're still your family, so you keep going," I said softly, piecing it together. "Yeah." He finally looked at me, "Because they're all I've got. And honestly, I've been hoping that maybe, if I just kept showing up, they'd start treating us better." I let out a shaky breath. "Matt, I get that. I do. But how long are we supposed to keep bending over backward for people who clearly don't care? They've made it obvious we're not part of their little club." He didn't say anything for a while. I could see the wheels turning in his head, though. He was processing everything, probably replaying the whole day in his mind like I had. "They've never apologized to you, have they?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, and they probably never will." That stung more than I expected, not just for me, but for Matt too. "So why are we still doing this?" I asked gently. "Why are we putting ourselves and our kids through this year after year?" Matt sat down at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. "I don't know. Tradition, maybe? Obligation? Guilt? None of those are good enough reasons," I said, sitting across from him. "We have our own family now. You, me, Lily. That's what matters." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his expression, like he was finally seeing things from my perspective. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been so focused on trying to fix things with them that I've been ignoring what's right in front of me." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "We don't need their approval, Matt. We're enough." He squeezed my hand, his shoulders relaxing a bit. "You're right." It wasn't some grand, dramatic moment. No big speeches or tears. Just understanding. And honestly, that meant more to me than any apology from his family ever could. After our conversation, things felt lighter. Like we'd finally cracked open something that had been sitting between us for a long time. Matt stood up, pacing the kitchen. "So what do we do now? Just stop going to family events?" I shrugged. "Honestly, yeah. Why keep putting ourselves in situations where we end up hurt?" He stopped pacing and turned to face me. "But they're still my family." I got it. I really did. Blood ties are hard to break. But at some point, you have to choose peace over obligation. "Family doesn't treat people like crap," I said gently. "And they've made it clear that we're not a priority to them. We've been bending over backward for years, Matt. Where has that gotten us?" He sat down again, rubbing his hands over his face. "It's just hard, you know, letting go." I reached out, resting my hand on his arm. "I'm not saying you have to cut them off completely, but we need boundaries. We can't keep sacrificing our mental health to keep up appearances." Matt nodded slowly. You're right. I've been holding on to this idea that they'll change, but they won't. Not unless they want to. We sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people are really absorbing the truth. Finally, Matt spoke again. You know what hurt me the most? What? He looked down at his hands. When my grandpa asked what I wanted for Christmas, I told him I'd love a new set of grilling tools. Something small, nothing fancy. Instead, I got that meat masher with our last name on it. It's like they didn't even hear me. That broke my heart. I thought back to my own Christmas experiences as a kid. Growing up, my family wasn't perfect, but at least when they asked what I wanted, they actually listened. They don't see you, Matt, I said softly. They see who they want you to be, and when you don't fit that mold, they ignore you. He nodded, his jaw clenched. Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. For the first time, I saw how deeply this had affected him. It wasn't just about me feeling excluded. It was about him feeling invisible in his own family. I'm sorry, I whispered. He looked up, confused. Why are you apologizing? Because I didn't see it before, I admitted. I was so caught up in my own feelings that I didn't realize how much it hurt you too. Matt shook his head. No, you've been right all along. I've just been too stubborn to admit it. We sat there, holding hands across the table, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were truly on the same page. It wasn't about the gifts. It wasn't about the parties. It was about respect and realizing that we deserved better. So what do we do now? Matt asked again. I smiled. We focus on us. Our little family, we make our own traditions, ones that actually make us happy. He smiled back. I like that idea. And just like that, something shifted. The weight of years of disappointment started to lift. For once, it felt like we were choosing each other, over the expectations, the obligations, and the people who couldn't see our worth. We were finally free. In the days following that conversation, things started to feel different. It wasn't a dramatic change, but there was a shift in the air between me and Matt. For once, we were on the same team. No more bending over backward to fit into a family that didn't seem to want us there. No more waiting around for approval that was never coming. We were done. A few days after Christmas, we sat down with Lily to explain things in a way she could understand. So, we're not going to Aunt Linda's house anymore? She asked, tilting her head. No, sweetie, I said gently. We're going to start making our own Christmas traditions. Her face lit up. Like what? Matt jumped in, his smile genuine for the first time in days. Like baking cookies, watching Christmas movies, and staying in our pajamas all day. Maybe even taking a trip to see snow next year. Lily's eyes widened. Can we go sledding? Of course, I laughed. We'll make it the best Christmas ever. Hearing her excitement made my heart swell. This was what mattered. Our little family, happy and together. The next big test came when Matt's family invited us to a New Year's gathering. You gonna go? I asked him, curious. He shook his head without hesitation. No, I'm done, Amy. I'm not putting us through that again. I couldn't help but smile. Are you sure? They might get upset. He shrugged. Let them. I'm choosing us now. It felt like a huge victory. For so long, I'd been the one pushing for boundaries, and now Matt was right there with me. But of course, his family didn't take it well. A few days later, Linda left a passive-aggressive comment on one of my social media posts, a picture I'd taken at a friend's birthday party. Wow, looks like you remembered your camera this time. I rolled my eyes, showing Matt the comment. See, this is why we're done. He just shook his head. Let them be petty. It doesn't matter anymore. And he was right. It didn't matter. For the first time, I felt free from their judgment and expectations. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done giving them space in my head. We spent New Year's Eve at home, just the three of us. We made homemade pizza, played board games, and stayed up to watch the fireworks on TV. At one point, Lily snuggled up next to me on the couch. Mom? Yeah, baby? I'm really glad we stayed home. I kissed her forehead, feeling my heart swell again. Me too, sweetie. Matt glanced over from the kitchen, a beer in his hand. He raised it in a toast. Here's to new traditions. I laughed, raising my hot cocoa. To new traditions. We clinked our drinks together, and in that moment, everything felt right. It wasn't about the gifts or the gatherings. It was about the people who truly loved and valued us. We weren't just surviving the holidays anymore. We were thriving. And as I sat there with my little family, I realized something important. Sometimes, family isn't about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, the people who choose you over and over again. And in that moment, I knew we'd chosen each other. And that was more than enough. Story 2. Despite her refusal to work, my fiancé wanted me to provide for her whole family. I ended our relationship without hesitation. I'm a 30-year-old man who has always taken pride in being a responsible and industrious individual. I eventually got to a point where I was financially secure and even somewhat comfortable after years of putting in a lot of effort at my job. I had enough money to enjoy the occasional indulgence, a respectable savings account, and my own place. Before I met my girlfriend, I'll call her G, 2 years ago, I felt like I had everything I needed. She had the ability to make everyone around her feel special and was charming and lovely. I initially believed I had struck gold. She talked about her goals and aspirations all the time, creating this image of a person who wished to work with me to construct a future. I gave it my all. However, as the months passed, I started to see holes in the facade. She spoke a lot about her professional objectives, but she never really tried to get employment. I'm taking some time to figure things out, she said. However, that period grew into months. Then, over the course of a year, I paid for the majority of our bills, including food, rent, and nights out, and she never offered to help. She requested me to send her brother money, which was the first major red flag. She batted her eyelids and remarked, "He's going through a rough patch. It's only $1,000. It would mean a lot to me, because you're doing so great." After some hesitation, I gave in. I justified it by saying that I was assisting someone in need, but I secretly felt apprehensive. She didn't seem to care that her brother never reimbursed me. She shrugged and replied, "He's family," as though that made everything okay. When G began discussing her parents, the situation became heated. One evening, she added, "They're struggling too. They're behind on several expenses and the house needs maintenance. Perhaps you might lend them a hand a bit." Stunned, I gazed at her. "Now you want me to provide for your whole family?" She gave an eye roll. "I'm not asking you to do it indefinitely, only until they are able to stand again." I felt confined. I couldn't deny the developing feeling that G was using me, but I also didn't want to be the villain. Nevertheless, in the hopes that it would stop there, I consented to assist with a few minor costs. It didn't. A family supper at her parents' place was the last straw. Her father drew me aside and remarked, "You're doing really well financially," as G stated. "I have been working on a company proposal, and we were wondering if you would be interested in investing in it." I was blown away. G's family was now treating me like a cash machine, in addition to discussing my finances behind my back. In an attempt to maintain harmony, I said, "I'll give it some thought," but I felt angry within. That night, on the way home, I approached G. "Why did you share my financial situation with your family?" I insisted. "It's confidential." She gave a totally unconcerned shrug. "What's so important?" "They are my relatives. I assumed you would wish to assist them." "Assist them, G. All of our expenditures are already being covered by me. I'll probably never see the money I gave your brother again. Your dad is now requesting that I invest in a company venture. This is becoming unmanageable." She crossed her arms defensively and her face changed. "Why are you bringing this up so much?" "You're doing all right. They also require assistance. Doesn't a nice boyfriend do that? Provide for his girlfriend's family?" What I was hearing was unbelievable. "It's one thing for G to support you. Provide for the whole family. I'm not in charge of it." She laughed. "Whoa, what a waste of a generous man." I still remember the talk. I became aware that I wasn't viewed as a partner by G. I was seen by her as a provider. Instead of establishing a true equal relationship, she was more focused on what I could provide her. My stomach turned at the notion. She revealed the shocking information a week later. During breakfast, she added nonchalantly, "I've been thinking. Perhaps you ought to resign from your position and begin a new endeavor. Something with even higher profits." My coffee nearly suffocated me. Please pardon me. "You're intelligent and driven," she replied. "If you worked harder, you might be earning a lot more. Additionally, we could adequately support my family with a higher wage." I set down my drink and gazed at her. "Are you even able to hear yourself? I'm already putting a lot of effort into supporting us. And now you want me to go above and above to provide for your family?" She scowled. "You're exaggerating. All I'm trying to do is keep everyone safe." "No, you're attempting to drain me of every last drop," I said, raising my voice. "Gee, this isn't a collaboration. You keep taking, and I never receive anything back." She doubled down instead of offering an apology. "Perhaps you simply aren't the man I believed you to be." Coldly, she said, "Without grumbling, a true guy would look after his girlfriend and her family." That was it. I was finished. I responded, "Maybe I'm not the man for you if that's what you think. Because I will never longer be used in this manner." She had a startled expression. "What do you say? I declare that we are finished." I spoke aggressively. "Get your belongings and go." Geez. The reaction was just as dramatic as I had anticipated. She became irate and accused me of being cold-hearted, self-centered, and unable to see the importance of family values. She said, "You're leaving me and my family when we need you the most." "No, G," I responded, in a composed yet forceful tone. "I'm leaving a toxic relationship in which you have treated me like your financial account. You have said unequivocally that your family and their needs come first, not us, not constructing something together. They won't exploit me any longer." She used every manipulative strategy in the book to try and guilt-trip me. She sobbed, "I gave up so much to be with you. I might have been in a relationship with someone who genuinely values me." I arched an eyebrow. "Given up. You declined to work. Expected me to cover all costs. You expect me to provide for your whole family now. What specifically have you given up?" She rushed out of the room, as her face flushed with rage. As she packed her belongings, I could hear her banging doors. She left without saying anything else, which shocked me since I thought she may attempt one final trick to get me to change my decision. She attempted to turn our mutual acquaintances against me over the course of the following several days. She presented herself as the victim of a nasty, unappreciative partner and accused me of being frugal and violent. Thankfully, the most of them were able to see through her falsehoods. Some even contacted me to share private remarks she made about me throughout our relationship, griping that I wasn't doing enough for her family when I was paying for everything. Realizing how long she had been taking advantage of me hurt. However, it also reaffirmed that I had made the correct choice. When her brother called and demanded to know why I had left his sister behind, it was the last straw. "You were meant to look after her," he replied vehemently. "You are to blame for her current difficulties." The irony made me laugh out loud. "I have no responsibility for your sister," I said. "And perhaps she wouldn't be hurting right now if you all spent more time caring for yourselves and less time suckling off others." I was unconcerned when he hung up on me. I felt free for the first time in years. I spent the following several months concentrating on starting again without G's entitlement consuming me all the time. I was able to devote more time, money, and attention to things that truly mattered: my friendships, my interests, and my work. I had the impression that a burden had been removed. A common acquaintance once told me that she had returned to living with her parents and was having trouble finding another person to help pay for her way of life. The companion laughed and remarked, "She's telling everyone, you're a cheapskate." To be honest, though, I believe that people are beginning to see through her. I needed no more closure than that. Geez, she had finally been ensnared in a web of deception and entitlement. Even though it was a horrible experience, I am thankful for it now. It made me realize how important it is to establish limits and value myself. I came to understand that love isn't about giving. It's about cooperation, respect, and support for one another. This is the most important lesson I've learned. Nobody should ever make you believe that your worth is dependent on what you can offer. Building relationships is about working together, not supporting someone who doesn't do their share. Have you ever had a toxic relationship who attempted to exploit your generosity, Knowing your value and refusing to accept anything less is the finest form of retaliation, so hit the subscribe button. For more tales about defending oneself and overcoming obstacles, stay tuned.